Here are some of the other approaches people have used historically for the problem of evil, and some of you alluded to some of these already. On the one hand, we have the sovereignty approach, and you would find this among many denominations that are more reformed in nature, have more of a Calvinistic origins or pedigree. And in this perspective, God is in complete control. Nothing is happening outside of the will of God. God's commands are good, God's prohibitions are evil. But even in this context, they would turn to like a verse in Isaiah that says, "Know you not that the wicked were made for the day of judgment?" So even the wicked and evil people in this world, God made for a reason and a purpose. God's will is synonymous with the good. There is no differentiation, like the Euthyphro dilemma. There's no standard of good over here and God over here. It is the same. In fact, the scriptures tell us God is good. And if you ask me to define good in this context, I would say it's a synonym with the true and the beautiful. And that also comes from the ancient Greeks. They saw the good, the true, and the beautiful as synonyms. And I would say they're also all synonyms for God. And I would define all three of those terms, the good, the true, and the beautiful, the same way. That is whole, that which is whole and complete and lacking nothing. That's what makes something good. That what makes something true. That what makes something beautiful, and that is what makes something God. That which is whole and complete and lacking nothing. God is righteous, holy, and good, and these values are not arbitrary but immutable. Remember, that was one of the problems with the Euthyphro dilemma. It said, well, if God and good is synonymous, then God can say, "Thou shalt not kill" today, and then tomorrow God could tell you, "Kill every last one of them." And which one do you go with? Do you go with God's first commandment, with the most recent commandment? Do you negotiate something between the two commandments? What are you supposed to do? But if God is synonymous with goodness and his commands are good and his prohibitions are evil, then it's not up to us to even understand it or think we know. We're just supposed to trust and obey, right? And that is a pure, like, authoritarian sort of model. Obey, obey. That is how you find salvation. That's how you find goodness, by obedience to the divine. Now, the other approach, with some of you, I think Dahlia and others might have alluded to, was the free will argument. And what this argument is saying is sentient beings like humans, we make real choices with real consequences. God is not culpable for poor human choices. God is also not responsible for the angelic rebellion we talked about earlier. And I think Nathan alluded to this one at the very beginning of class. If God intervened in human choices, we wouldn't be free. That would be like a helicoptering God who didn't let us scrape a knee or any little inconvenience happen to us, but he's monitoring everything. Now, the philosophical tension, of course, between these two, and we can talk about this next week if you'd like, it's the tension we see in the scriptures and in different theological camps between the sovereignty of God and the free will of humans. Logically speaking, to the degree that God is sovereign, man is not free. And to the degree that man is free, God is not sovereign, almost like a teeter-totter.
But
Any comments on that? Yeah,
can it be
Nathan.
both, right? Because since God is
Ooh.
operating outside of time,
Mhm.
right, he's taking an external perspective. Because, like, I kind of grew up in, like Grace Community Church and with John MacArthur and all
Yes.
that. And, like, there are certain verses in the Bible that speak to, this sort of, the sovereignty of God, right? Like you have, Romans 9 with the Pharaoh, for this reason I raised you up so that my power might be demonstrated, right?
Yes.
It's like, where was his, like, God raised him for that reason,
It
but
even
did he
said
have
he
free
hardened
will?
his heart, right? After a certain point, it almost seems like Pharaoh had a choice at the beginning, but after denying so many times, God, it said God hardened his heart. And it's just like you said, because God was going to show his glory.
Yeah, but if he says, for this reason I raised you up, right? It's like God had this plan all along,
Yes,
you know? So
right.
what so can't it be both?
That's very postmodern and good for you. I would agree. And maybe it's not either or, that God is sovereign or man is free. But, and I would agree with you, Nathan. And the way I would deal with it is I would call what humans have bracketed freedom. And what I mean by that is within these brackets, within God's sovereignty, here's our little selves. We have incredible freedom in this little bracket with real choices, with real consequences. But none of these choices in here that I'm making can change or overturn the will or purpose of God. And God, in his sovereignty, is actually able to take all our little free will brackets of every human and sentient being on the planet and still make them all work out to accomplish his glory and maximize his glory, which is incredible to think about.
Um,
So I would call that like bracketed or limited freedom. Go for it, Joseph.
oh, okay. It was interesting on what day was that? Tuesday, at our college age group. We did a doctrine talk about Imago Dei in the sense of within relation to who we are, like there is an image of God within us, and
Yes.
that's exemplary of what you're talking about within relation, like just as much as the Lord is sovereign, he also has free will. And in that same perspective, if we have the image of him within us, we're able to replicate that to some extent. Like obviously, in no way are we as complete, like you said, or as anything, like nowhere near. But that same sense of you can have a sense of sovereignty in the sense of understanding that this issue or what happened is outside of your range, but also understanding the free will and choice within the range that you do have. It's that same kind of the word duality comes back and back to it, but like that is where that lies. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, very good. Any other thoughts, comments on
Yeah,
that?
Professor Blackburn, now I can't explain this as well as Mike Winger can on YouTube. Mike Winger is like a theologian on YouTube. Actually not a he's actually not a Calvinist, and he like explains Romans 9. Like Romans 9 was really in the context of it talking about like the nation of Israel, and um not actually like choosing who like will or will not like be saved, and he like goes back to like Genesis, and I reread Genesis. It actually a bunch of times throughout, no, not Genesis, Exodus, sorry, Exodus for the Pharaoh, and like a bunch of times it kind of said, I think, like um and he hardened his heart with a lowercase h, meaning like Pharaoh hardened his own heart a whole bunch of times first, and then it starts saying he, as in God, capital H, like hardened. So Mike Winger puts this best, like the doctrine of judicial hardening. In other words, like if we harden our own hearts towards God enough, like God will, you know what, fine, have your way, like he said that with Israel itself a bunch of times, like have your way and I'll harden your heart too, so like Mike Winger, Romans 9 YouTube, like shout out, he gives a great like explanation on that.
Yeah, I think that's fair representation of that passage.
But that also speaks to the subjectivity, right, that we bring to reading the Bible.
Yep, it does. Okay.
Yep, all kinds of mysteries out there with